Welcome back to Task and Purpose. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Since the start of the Russo-Ukraine war, we've seen some unique military equipment produced from around the world deployed in Ukraine. But what hasn't got much attention is Ukraine's very own domestically produced BTR variant called the BTR-4. It's one of the world's newest armored vehicles. Its systems are specifically designed to overcome and destroy Soviet-era equipment. Let's find out what happens when you mix a little bit of Soviet armored vehicle with sophisticated Western technology. We'll track the BTR-4 all the way across Ukraine's fascinating armored history development. We'll take a look at its specifications and some of the surprising lessons that we've learned from analyzing its performance in combat. But first, this video is sponsored by National University. They're a network of nonprofit educational institutions united in their mission to offer a student-centered, world-class education system that focuses on offering quality, market-relevant programs to lifelong learners. They have more than 75 different degree programs. They use a holistic, whole human approach to support their 41,000 students and 190,000 alumni. They know the cost, time, and lack of support are the biggest barriers for adults trying to go to college or university. And for the active duty service members in the audience, National University applications are reviewed year-round, so you can begin your online college classes when it's convenient for you, whether you take classes online, on base, or on location. They have staff that are experts at helping you navigate your journey as an active duty or military veteran. Year-round enrollment, free tutoring and counseling, and transfer-friendly accredited programs. Learn more and start your education journey that could lead to a new, more exciting career path just by clicking on my link in the description. Now, the BTR series of vehicles came about after World War II when the Soviet Army realized that they didn't really have any dedicated armored transportation for their dismounted infantry to quickly move across the battlefield. Out of the program to produce a dedicated armored vehicle came the BMP and BTR platform. After gaining independence when the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine was left with all this old Soviet war stock, namely all the BTRs that Russia had kindly left behind, along with all of the factories that produced military vehicles. Ukraine's first dabble into armored vehicle production started with the BTR-94. The Ukrainian-produced BTR-94 was largely an effort to continue to produce armored personnel carriers for their own army, as well as creating a basis for large-scale military production to help their economy when they wanted to sell it to foreign militaries. One such factory that produced vehicles for the Soviet Union during World War II, but now creates unique Ukrainian tanks, is called the Kharkiv Morozov Machine Building Design Bureau. It's been in service since 1927. You also have the Kiev Armored Plant that's been around since 1935. Fellow history nerds out there will immediately recognize the KMDB as the company that designed the T-34, which was famously the backbone of the Soviet tank force in World War II. Isn't it ironic that they're now creating weapons to fight against the Russian army?
It's not ironic, it's just coincidental.
The development of the BTR-4 originally started in the early 2000s at the Kharkiv Morozov plant. But from what I could gather on open source intelligence about modern Ukraine, armored vehicle production seems to mainly be happening at the Malyshev Factory in Kharkiv. That's the one that is still operating to this day. In a lot of ways, the BTR-4 is a deliberate step away from the traditional Russian BTR design. And because of this, it serves more as an infantry fighting vehicle rather than just an armored personnel carrier. The BTR-4 armored vehicle created by Ukraine is nicknamed the Bucephalus after the horse ridden by Alexander the Great. But knowing regular grunts, the first thing that comes to mind with the word Bucephalus probably isn't the classical Greek equine. Wrap it up, fellas! The first prototype was displayed in 2006 and accepted into military service by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense not that long ago, in 2008. Ukraine's attempt to sell the BTR-4 to foreign militaries shows how sometimes failure can work in your favor. The first country to place an order for them was the newly formed Iraq government in 2011. Unfortunately, the Iraqi army quickly rejected the order after realizing that due to poor quality steel used in the construction, the hull was already cracked, along with a handful of other manufacturing issues, like only a fraction of their engines even starting. Kazakhstan was next in line to receive the BTR-4 in 2012, but canceled their order as well after a delivered prototype failed to meet their specifications. So with each export model costing about $1.8 million, this was a major scandal for Ukraine's military-industrial complex. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense ended up doing an audit and firing a bunch of people from one of their subcontractors in response. This might raise some questions to you about whether or not the current models in Ukraine are just as bad. Was there corruption that led to this poor quality of steel? What happened here? The Russian invasion of Crimea in 2014 shed some light on this. The rejected BTR-4s that were originally exported and then returned to Ukraine proved to be a blessing in disguise, because they were quickly put on the front lines against Russia and to great effect. In light of their success, the Ukraine Ministry of Defense created orders for new BTR-4s and integrated the models rejected for export into their current line units. Within the first 6 months of adoption into the Ukrainian army in 2014, over 900 individual improvements were implemented, which is an absolutely astounding number when you consider most armored vehicle improvements take years to implement just 1 or 2 changes. It is essentially only a BTR in name because it's so radically different from the Soviet-era BTR design and fighting doctrine. This means that instead of simply playing the role of battle taxi, it has a more direct role with infantry support in the fight, more akin to the BMP or the American M2 Bradley. It achieves this in a couple of ways. The first and most important way is its unique hull design compared to traditional Russian BTR layouts. Like a normal BTR, there's 3 crewmen, the driver, gunner, and commander. They sit together in the front of the vehicle, but behind them is the mid-hull mounted engine. That separates the crew from the 7 to 9 dismounts in the back. Normal BTR designs mount the engine in the very rear in an effort to protect it from frontal fire and allow easier communication between the crew and the mounted infantry. However, this has huge drawbacks like incredibly cramped compartments for soldiers. Troops are forced to use small openings in the side that can only fit 1 person dismounting at a time. It can be a really awkward and tedious problem to have if you're trying to squeeze out the back of an armored vehicle and the doors are extremely small and you're carrying over 100 pounds of equipment and gear. The BTR-4 with its mid-placed engine eliminates all of these problems. This engine placement provides the infantry in the back plenty of space while also protecting them in the case of a frontal shot of the vehicle. A well-placed shot might not be a good day for the crew, but it keeps the soldiers in the back in the fight. Secondly, it allows the dismounts to exit via the back of the vehicle with large doors. This isn't just about comfort and convenience for the troops though, as much as we care about that. These kinds of adjustments have a significant impact on how a fight could swing when you need every advantage that you can get. This difference in layout also allows for a lot of modularity on the platform, and this is a major key factor. The BTR-4 base model can be produced with different variants in order to meet different roles, such as vehicle recovery, command and control, and armored ambulance. Ukraine apparently loves modularity almost as much as the US Department of Defense. The base model comes in at about 17 tons, which is about a ton more than your typical BTR variant. But this additional weight is already accounted for with a more powerful engine, the KMDB 3TD 2-stroke diesel engine, totaling 500 horsepower. This gives it a good power to weight ratio of 29 horsepower per ton, keeping it nimble and maneuverable on the battlefield. In fact, with a top speed of 110 kilometers per hour, or 68 miles per hour, it's a full 20 kilometers per hour faster than the Russian BTR-80. This also is helped by the mid-mounted engine, which more evenly spreads out the weight of the vehicle over its 8 large road wheels. This reduction in ground pressure allows the Ukrainian BTR-4 to go over harsher and muddier terrain without risking getting stuck. An absolute must-have when you look at the state of Ukraine and its countryside during the more wet months where it rains. Looking at the armor rating, all parts of the hull are rated to withstand 7.62mm armor-piercing rounds, essentially any kind of rifle or machine gun that a standard infantry squad would carry with them. And the standard front plating provides protection up to 50 caliber rounds, equivalent to a 12.7mm fired by Russian Cord or NSV heavy machine guns. These vehicles come standard with large bullet-resistant windows on the front and sides, allowing for greater visibility compared to the old BTR, and you have better situational awareness for the crew. But you have the option of flipping up additional armored plates to cover the windows, and you can use a thermal periscope system for navigation. These windows are one of the biggest visual departures from the Soviet-style BTR, and it's an easy way to identify the vehicle. The BTR-4 is far from invincible. According to ORXC tracking of the Ukrainian equipment losses during the war so far, a total of 56 Ukrainian BTR-4s have been destroyed or captured by Russian forces. To be perfectly honest, if this number is accurate, it's not a great sign for Ukraine, because when I looked at the Military Balance 2021 book, which is the authoritative source on worldwide military equipment numbers, they reported that Ukraine only had about 67 total BTRs in their inventory, so the vast majority have been destroyed. It is possible that I don't have the most up-to-date numbers, and Ukraine has been able to pump out and produce far more of these than I'm aware of. We'll get into the manufacturing and the new vehicles and the problems with manufacturing these currently at the end of the video. In order to counter the threat of RPGs and other anti-vehicle munitions, cage armor is often attached around critical components, which detonate a warhead before they can reach the main hull. What it does not protect against is enemy fire from another enemy BTR. When those vehicles meet on the battlefield, it'll always come down to who sees who first. However, this is where the real magic of the BTR-4 comes into play, and it shows its real advantage. To spot the enemy first, the BTR-4 is fitted with a remote control weapon station that contains day and night sights. All of this is produced internally, in-house, domestically in Ukraine. It uses light amplification, optional use of the IR spotlight, essentially a giant pair of night vision goggles. This is an ability many Soviet-era BTRs do not have. The fact that the turret is controlled by a motor with a joystick means that the operator can scan the battlefield faster. They can also sit in the front of the vehicle or be controlled by the commander. The old BTR's turret need to be manually moved and is much slower and less effective. A fascinating video that was released from the interior of the Ukrainian BTR-4 is what originally drew me to be interested in this vehicle. You see the soldiers sitting in the passenger seat operating the remote-controlled turret as the gunner. I couldn't find much official written reports on the abilities of this fire control system, but just from watching it in action, we can see that it has thermal imaging. This is a huge plus. I can't overstate how big of an advantage this is for Ukraine. Here, take a look at what it looks like to peer through the sights on a Russian BTR main gun system. Now take a look at peering through a BTR-4's system. You can zoom in, you can spot enemy tanks, heat signatures from miles away. Evidence that the Ukrainian BTR-4 is effective comes from the fact that every time Russian soldiers capture one, they prefer to use the BTR-4 instead of their own equipment. And I think this has everything to do with its targeting system and its higher resolution thermal imaging devices. We need to take a closer look at the turret to understand why it's better than the Russian BTR turret. The turret system is called the BM-7 Paris, which is a domestically produced turret fire control system made right at home in Kharkiv. This is where the future of defense industry is investing a ton of their resources, brainpower, and energy. The global remote weapon station market accounted for $8.12 billion for the year of 2017, and it's believed to reach as high as $24 billion by 2026. The Ukrainian BTR-4 is fitted with the TRAC-M fire control system, which allows the gunner and the commander to switch between operating the turret. TRAC-M also has an electro-optical sight with an integrated laser rangefinder that houses a third-generation thermal camera for night operations. That laser rangefinder is huge. It basically gives the gunner smart firing capabilities, and all of this is stabilized as well. These are all features that the Russian BTR often lacks. It's difficult to find information on the TRAC-M, but I found a presentation for a similar fire control system made by another Ukrainian company based out of Kiev called the Universal Information Technology. The weapon systems can depress and elevate between 13 degrees to 45 degrees, although I've seen some footage where it appears to elevate higher than that. Its range of motion is greater than the BTR-70 capabilities, allowing Ukrainians to engage enemy troops that are higher and lower, which gives an advantage in urban combat. If you and your enemy don't have armor thick enough to defeat incoming rounds from each other, it's a game of who can see who first. And this is the system that almost guarantees Ukraine will be able to see an enemy BTR first. The commander has access to the Panorama 2P TV camera, which is attached on top of the combat module and gives a 360-degree independent view for the commander to oversee the battlefield near and far. These optics and fire control systems are really at the heart of what makes the BTR-4 more like a Western-style infantry fighting vehicle than a Soviet-designed one. The thing slings 30mm rounds at about 330 rounds per minute, which is similar to the BTR-80, and it contains a coaxial 7.62mm machine gun and 40mm smoke canisters for visually obstructing the enemy's view of you. And while the turret itself might look boxy and oversized, this is designed this way to get extra rounds of ammunition into the ready position. Translated to armored vehicle talk, this means it has more rounds rounds ready to fire without the need for reloading, which is a tedious and often complicated task for a vehicle crew. My understanding is that the magazine holds 300 rounds in it. The Russian BTR, on the other hand, only has a capacity of 250 rounds. Unfortunately for the BTR-4, the addition of the mounted turret means that the infantry capacity drops from 9 to 7, but the loss in manpower is more than made up for with its additional firepower. With the Bar-Rear ATGM system, a semi-active laser-guided anti-tank missile capable of penetrating 800mm of armor at 5,000 meters away. This system comes standard with the Ukrainian BTR-4, and we've seen many Russian BTRs don't have this. There are of course far fewer of these BTR-4s created, with estimates being around maybe a total of 750 were produced, many of which were sent to foreign markets. But these additional ATGMs are one of the main reasons it serves more in a direct action role rather than it just cart infantry around the battlefield, and we've seen in this particular war zone how lighter vehicles often come face to face with heavier main battle tanks like the T-72, and they need to have options to defend themselves. The ATGM is perfect for this situation. Just like its normal BTR counterparts, the BTR-4 is capable of amphibious operations crossing bodies of water at 10 km per hour without the need for additional military bridging assets. It does this via the large propellers mounted at the rear of the vehicle, and if you think firing from the move on land is difficult, try doing it from water. And that's why the 30mm BM7 Paris, the turret system, is capable of providing stabilized fire even when waterborne. This ability to continue to fire and maneuver through water obstacles cannot be understated in how crucial it is in order to keep the momentum of a fight going in its favor. Since 2014, they have seen extensive action both in Ukraine, since the invasion of Crimea, and by the Iraqi army against insurgents and ISIL. Other countries like Nigeria and Indonesia have also adopted the vehicle after the improvements were implemented. Since the breakout in large-scale warfare, the BTR-4 has been pushed to the absolute limit, so we can truly see how effective this is on the battlefield. BTR-4 production was steadily continuing after 2014, with research and development beginning on additional armor packages and other upgrades like MBC protection and mortar variants. But production and development of the BTR-4 was brought to a quick halt during February of 2022. BTR-4 production is largely focused in northern Ukraine, especially in the northeast city of Kharkiv, which saw massive fighting in the breakout of the war. Unfortunately for Ukraine, even as these areas are taken back from Russian control, it's going to be a very long time before these factories are up and running again. For now, the amount of BTR-4s that Ukraine entered the war with, about 67, are probably the BTR-4s that Ukraine will likely finish the war with. It's tough to find the status of the Kharkiv Morozov plant. One tweet from March 2nd claims it was destroyed by Russian fighter jets early in the war, but I couldn't verify that. And the much better known Malyshev plant in Kharkiv started manufacturing BTR-4s in 2018, and they employ about 5,000 of the city's residents. There have been confirmed reports from Ukraine that this manufacturing plant has been hit by Russian artillery shelling, damaging their facilities, which has slowed down or stopped production at this point. Ever since the invasion, we've seen seriously impressive performance from the platforms on all fronts. Videos from the early days of the fighting showed the BTR-4 was able to engage and destroy Russian T-72 tanks just with its 30mm autocannon, a target it was only intended to engage with its anti-tank missiles. Videos mostly filmed by crew members show how agile the BTR-4 can be in a fight, quickly ducking in and out of cover as it engaged targets before they're able to know what even hit them. Because of its combination of speed, dismounted infantry, and deadly weapon array, the BTR-4 has posed as one of Ukraine's deadliest and most capable vehicles, able to take on infantry, IFVs, and tanks all in one fight. By February of 2022, Ukraine had around 200 BTR-4s in its ranks, it sounds like, and the current number of vehicles lost is somewhat unclear, although Orexy says that it's about 49 that have probably been abandoned and destroyed platforms. They have surfaced all around the internet. Russia has been capturing intact BTR-4s as much as possible to use against Ukraine, which only shows how effective a vehicle it is if Russia is trying to preserve them rather than simply scuttle them in place. Now, the number 200 conflicts with the earlier number of 67 from military balance reports, so there are conflicting reports, and it's possible that Ukraine has created a lot more in between 2021 and 2022. Some of these captured vehicles have since been recovered by the Ukrainians, while others were destroyed in the fighting. What we do know is that there are still a significant number of them after 6 months of fighting, as videos of BTR-4s engaging and destroying Russian targets continue to pop up during their current counteroffensive in eastern Ukraine. The future of the BTR-4 is currently a bit up in the air, pending how the war in Ukraine continues and its eventual end. This might be the first and last major conflict it sees, or it could be just the first of many successful iterations of the platform. It's anyone's guess when production lines would be able to pick up again to replace the numbers lost, and we might not see another factory new model until well after the fighting has stopped. But in the meantime, the ones in the field will be the deciding factor in a ground fight for a lot of troops. Thank you so much for watching Spare Parts Army. I really appreciate your time. If you found some information valuable or compelling, please hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys all again